Welcome everyone to this webinar for the moon cycles. This is April the 11th, 2023, and we're going to talk about the moon and the stars and the planets and all sorts of interesting things. I want to say welcome to everyone, and if you will go to the chat and just type in where you are in the world so I can look back later and see who joined us. So just let me know in that chat where you live. Diane's from Iowa. Welcome. Yeah. So this is the introduction to a new class that I'm getting ready to teach starting a week from today called Living with the Moon Phases. And if you're not already on my mailing list, please do sign up. Let me post it in the chat just in case somebody doesn't already have it. There we go. And then I'll get out of chat because it takes whoops, that's not what I meant to do. I'd like to see chat previews, but I want chat to go away from my screen. Okay, there we go. Technology, thank you very much. So I want to start before I call the directions, and start by saying, we are questioning, I think, really, are you captivated by the moon? Do you go out and howl at the moon? I've been known to do that sometimes. But do you like to go out and see the illumination of the moon in the night sky and look at that? Because throughout our human history, our ancestors throughout time have been captivated by the moon, captivated by the stars, and watch those phases of the moon from light to dark, and have told stories and operated calendars associated with the moon. So those moon stories are the very heart of our ancient ancestors, and they connected to the natural rhythms of our body, our mind, our nature. So I want to spend a little time today talking about the vibrational influences from those celestial bodies in our solar system. These vibrations don't control our lives, but we can make our lives a little bit easier if we get in harmony with those celestial influences. So I want to start by calling in the ancestors with the directions. I've been smudging here for a little while, and so I have the smudge. If you typically smudge before calling the directions, then by all means go ahead and do that. And I think what I will do is, let me see if I can pin myself here. It's not giving me the option. Here it is. Okay, so I am spotlighted, I think, now for everyone, and so you can see the smudging that's going around, and send that out from my space here in North Carolina to you wherever you are in the world. And if you haven't already posted in the chat, please do post and let me know where you are in the world, and I'll be able to look back at it later and see everyone. So join me now as we call the directions, and I start with my Hathor rattle, start in the center. Starting in the center, I say, thank you, divine light. Thank you for the light coming from above and flowing down from the sun and the moon and the stars. Thank you for starting our journey today. And I turn to the east. The east, the direction of the rising sun. And there is Tefnut sitting on the mountainside awaiting her daughter Nut to give birth to the sun. The Egyptian god Ra, sun god Ra, assigned Nut that job to receive the moon in the west and give birth to the moon in the east. And so we call those ancient ancestors to light our path with that illumination from the sun and the moon. And we say thank you and turn to the south. In the south, we call the Egyptian and the Celtic ancestors Bridget, whose very name means light, bright. Bridget, who brings us light and illumination and calls us to contact and express our creative abilities. She is the goddess of creation, and she calls us to dance alongside Hathor and Bas, dance to the rhythm of life, open our hearts and our minds, and let the joy and the love and the laughter of the South come in and to and through us. And we say thank you. And I turn to the West, the direction of the setting sun, the direction of introspection and darkness. Nut sits in the west and receives that setting sun into her body to hold it in gestation. And the black bear comes to take us into her cave so that we may sit and listen to the teachings of the ancestors who've gone on before us. And of the Celtic line and the Egyptian line, the goddesses stand guard at the mouth, the Morrigan and Sekhmet. They are goddesses of the dark moon. They protect us and they remind us of the strength that we can gather from sitting in that introspection. And so as we come out of the black bear's cave, the Morrigan and the Sekhmet take us by the hand, one on each side, and lead us from that introspection in the west toward the north. They take us to the north, the direction of challenge and the direction of wisdom consciousness. And so there in the north is Ma'at and Danu of the Celtic line. Ma'at stands with her scales of balance, challenging us to stand up for justice, for balance, to stand up and follow our heart. Listen to what comes from within. And Danu and Ma'at call us to stand up as warriors of the heart, warriors of love, warriors of light, shining the light of the moon into the darkness. And we say thank you. I come back around full circle to the center and raise my hands to the heavens and say thank you. Thank you to the galaxy. Thank you to the stars and the Milky Way. Thank you to the sun. Thank you to the moon for guiding our way. And I turn and reach toward the earth, toward Mother Earth, and say thank you to Mother Earth for holding us, for giving us life, for opening her arms to the sun so that we may live. And we bow to Mother Earth. And I say, Aho, Ashi, Amen. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Hamdulillah. And so it is. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I have a few things to share with you, and I hope that you find some of this to be of benefit. Let me once again go back to the chat and post in my website. If you are not already on my mailing list, by all means go there and sign up on that mailing list. And so we've started our circle of guidance here today with calling the directions, with asking the goddesses, the ancestors, all of those of the past to be with us, to come with us, and particularly Mother Earth, because it's Mother Earth's moon that we're talking about today. And of course, the moon is not the only energetic influence in our lives. The sun is very, very important in our lives. The sun is that life-giving force, and there are the planets and the dwarf planets and the millions of asteroids and comets and meteorites. Throughout the upcoming course, we'll focus on those moon cycles, but we'll talk about those other heavenly influences and check in for guidance from the ancestors, particularly the Celtic and the Egyptian, because that's my personal spiritual line, growth line, and so I call on those ancestors quite frequently. And the moon passes, and her cycles all pass through the zodiac constellations, picking up vibrations that ripple through space. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. 5 days ago, our last full moon was in Libra, and that energy of Libra challenged us to look at ourselves, to dare to look at ourselves and our choices in relationships and in habitual patterns. And if we have the courage to look at these patterns, then we might see them from a different perspective and take responsibility for breaking some of those cycles that are not helpful to us, cycles that we repeat over and over, but know that they're not very helpful. So today, April the 11th, the moon is in Sagittarius, and on the 13th, we'll be at the third quarter of the moon. And as the new course starts, if you choose to be a part of that, we start it just prior to the new moon, which is a time for new beginnings. So I have a slideshow, and I'll talk through the slideshow. If you've been in other presentations with me, you know this is the way I do it. But we'll talk about the movement of the sun and the planets and the earth and the moon, of course. But before I start the slideshow, I want to ask if you have any questions. I'll be in this tiny little screen to the side, and I will not likely be able to see you if you raise your hand. But if you'll post in the chat, Debbie is going to check the chat to let me know if we have any questions as we go through. But before I share my screen, let me ask if anyone has any questions or comments. And if you do, just unmute yourself and go ahead and speak up. No comments coming through. Okay, we'll check and make sure that you have yourself muted, just so we won't have background noise going on. And then Debbie will share with me any questions that come up throughout. I'm perfectly happy with you, asking questions during the presentation. That's just fine with me. So let me share my screen and see if I can move it over just a little bit. So this is about living with the moon phases and the other celestial bodies that happen in the sky. The course starts next week and runs for 4 weeks. And I hope that today's presentation is a complete presentation in and of itself. I don't like to do these and leave you hanging with not enough information, but at the same time, if you choose to go deeper into this topic, you can do that with the upcoming course. So we start with the sun and our solar system. So that sun is this golden sphere that gives us life. We are alive on planet Earth because of that energy that we get from the sun. It energizes our bones, our physical body, it helps our food to grow, but it also energizes our spiritual connection. And we can more easily connect with that divine source if we let our inner sun connect with that universal energy that's out there. And so this is the solar system, and there we are. We're pretty small. I mean, we're fairly large among the planets, but next to the sun, we're pretty small, and our moon is even smaller. So this one is this came from Wikipedia. It's Earth's path through these zodiac constellations that we'll talk about. And that yellow dot in the middle is the sun, and then here's the moon circling around the sun. But this is just kind of a mock picture of all these constellations that we talk about and where they are around us. Because we do move through these constellations, and it does have an impact with the vibration around us. The constellations are made up of various stars, and somewhere about 3,000 years ago, the Babylonians started naming these and connecting the dots of the stars. Sometimes they're a little bit of a stretch as to the symbols that they're talking about, but I'm sure at some point in time somebody thought these were really good ideas. Nevertheless, this is the shape that we draw for the different constellations that we talk about, but the energy from those constellations is important to notice. So here we are in our solar system, just lined up. Not that we ever are lined up directly like this, but just to get a perspective, we're the third planet from the sun, and there's our tiny little moon. And so, you know, these larger planets that are close to us, Jupiter and Saturn in particular, have some pretty significant influences to what goes on in our world, and Venus and Mars affect us. So does the moon, and the cycles of the moon, you know, continue to go. We go from the new moon, what sometimes we call it the dark moon, because we can't see the moon when it's in that stage, and it goes from the waxing crescent to, you know, the half moon all the way to the full moon, and makes the cycle back around to the waning crescent and the waning half moon, coming back to the new moon. And so we'll talk more about these particular phases. But the moon, there are so many legends that come from all cultures, that come across time about the moon, you know, and you know, what is it? What is it about the moon that gathers our attention? Why is this significant? Well, unconsciously, the moon has always had an effect. You know, we are made of a great percentage of our body, at least 60% of our body is water, and the moon impacts water. Even the tides at our oceans change according to the moon. Those tides go out and tides come in with the changing of the moon. So it stands to reason that if the very enormous oceans are affected by the moon, then we too, who are more than half water, would be affected by the moon as well. And then there's the question, is this the man in the moon or the goddess in the moon? who is the moon? So I started asking a few questions of the moon to see what we could find, and looked at a few resources to see what a few people said. This is a picture I took from my house through the trees. I'm in a very wooded area, and so this is the full moon through the trees a couple of years ago. And so in my search, I ask the moon what he is or what she is. And this is a quote from a book that I'll share with you. The moon says, "Within me are rhythms, cycles, and eras, vaster than you can imagine. Within me also, the rhythm of the breath, the cycle of the moon and the turning of the seasons. Earth, air, fire, water. You will befriend the elements through your senses." A quote from Rhea Wolf from her book, The Light That Changes, subtitle, The Moon in Astrology, Stories and Time. It's a short little book, and it's just full of all sorts of nuggets of precious things. So I wanted to share that with you today. So, but it still didn't answer the question, is it the man in the moon or the goddess in the moon? Well, English, in writings that are English, French, Spanish, Greek, and Latin, over time, those writings have referred to the moon as a woman or as a female. We have Greek goddesses that include Artemis and Demeter, the Roman Luna and Diana, in the Celtic Anya and Eanrud, and the list goes on and on and on. But Britain, for a time, was called Albion, which is the goddess name who was called the White Milk Moon Goddess. Even Europa was called the White Moon Cow, the goddess Europa. And in Finland, there was Luna, who gave birth to the great world egg to hatch the universe. So we have a lot of feminine words connected to the moon. The Peruvian moon was called Mamakila. And in ancient Egypt, they had quite a few moon goddesses, including Bast, Isis, and Hathor, but they also had some moon gods. And in Sumeria and the Near East, there were many moon legends, things like the Queen of Heaven and stories that go on and on. But as we moved into the age of patriarchy, stories began to change. Whoops, I just clicked the wrong direction. There we go. Even in Arabia, not just Saudi Arabia, but that part of the Middle East, in pre-Islamic times, the moon was regarded as feminine. Her name was Manat, the moon mother of Mecca. But we also hear about the man in the moon. And these drawings, these came out of Wikipedia. Now, I've seen other drawings. I couldn't find a picture of one, but where this whole section is a man sitting on the moon here, humped over. But at any rate, there are many cultures that see a man in the moon, or see animals sometimes in the moon as well. In Australia, Malaysia, South Pacific, Moon Man is the language that's used, and specifically Moon Man is named Hina in Hawaii and Yulau in Chinese. And then there's a reference to the old man in the moon. Out of the Jewish tradition, Jacob is regarded as the moon. And in Egypt, there's Ra, sometimes called Amun-Ra, the sun god, but also the moon god, because the name translates to the beautiful one who illuminates the gods. So across time, there we have looked at the moon and created lunar calendars. Um, Even today, lunar calendars determine the Chinese New Year, Ramadan in the Islamic tradition, Passover in Jewish, Lent in the Christian is all lunar based in terms of the date of those occurrences. And there is a luna solar calendar using both the moon and the position of the sun that are the calendars used in the Chinese, Vietnamese, Hindu, Hebrew, and Thai calendars are called lunisolar calendars even today. So the moon cycles are here and they're with us. Everything in the world has a cycle. That cycle is just what we call a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And if we will open ourselves to that moon energy, to the moon's guidance, it can help us clear things and help us create new intentions. For example, a new moon is a time for new beginnings. It's a time to really set new, to begin to plan to set new objectives. And the word is that seeds, both physical seeds for plants and seeds from our mind, our intentions, planted at the new moon, reach their full potential at the full moon. So these are the phases of the moon. This is the sunlight coming in. We have the new moon. You may have heard people talk about the 8 phases of the moon. So it's the new moon, the waxing crescent, waxing meaning growing, the growing crescent, the first quarter, the waxing gibbous, the full moon, and then we reverse it, the waning gibbous moon, the last quarter, half moon, and the waning crescent back to the new moon. A continuous cycle that takes about 29 days or so, not exactly, but very close to that. So let's look just briefly at each of those cycles. Of course, in the course, I'll go into deeper explanation about each of these. But the new moon represents new beginnings. It's the invisible moon and everything is cleared. Our slate is cleared and we can start over for the next month, the next 4 weeks, with looking at what our intentions really are and what we want to do and how we want to change or support what we're doing. So the waxing crescent moon, just a few days later, is a really good time to be writing those new intentions. The new moon's a good time to take a breath and let it clear out. And then as it moves into waxing crescent, begin to intentionally think about those new ideas. And as you get to that half moon, kind of reflect on those intentions and make decisions about which of those you really want to put energy into and which of those go on the back burner. And so as you move on a few more days later, look back at what you've decided to work on, to keep in your list, and refine that list, because the light is growing. There's a growing illumination. We're almost to the full moon. Which of those do you want that light to shine on? And so when we reach the full moon, we take those intentions and we set goals, but not just any kind of goals. The full moon is a time for setting goals on a soul level, of really sealing those intentions, really sending them out into the world, opening yourself and letting them begin to manifest. And so as we go into the waning gibbous time, reflecting on what we've looked at, what we've set out, what we've thought about, what we've put into motion, and say thank you, thank you, thank you. And begin to, as that slowly the moon begins to wane, we go inward, looking at what we've said, what we've done, expressing gratitude. And as we move on to that third quarter, that's the very best time to really look at forgiveness, forgiving yourself for not meeting up to your own expectations, forgiving others that you feel have done something that you thought was hurtful. And then as we get into that waning crescent, that tiny little wedge of a moon before it goes dark, that's the time to let it go. Let it go. Because whatever is going to manifest is going to manifest without your worry, without your niggling to make sure that you've done everything you can possibly do. Let it go. Let it go and open to the possibility of coming into a new moon. Right now, on April the 11th, we're right between the third quarter and the waning crescent. And if you choose to join the course that's coming up, we'll start just before the new moon, that time for new beginnings. So let's talk a little about weaving the stories of our lives with moon cycles, because it's very important to ask for guidance from the ancestors, but how does that apply to us? What does that mean to us? So traditionally, the Mayans referred to the moon as a female and saw the phases of the moon like the stages of a woman's life. So the Mayan moon goddess is actually the image of a woman associated with sexuality, procreation, fertility, growth. But they don't just limit it to humans. It includes humans and the vegetation and the crops. So in Mesoamerica in general, including that Mayan era, the moon is associated with water, with wells, rainfall, creeks, rivers, streams, lakes, but with that water. So the stories around the moon, at least in that part of the culture, really is associated with life and procreation and water. The Egyptian and the Celtic moon stories refer to light and dark, as well as the cycles of life and fertility and women's cycles. The Egyptians called the moon the mother of the universe. And even the hieroglyph, Mena, M-E-N-A, that particular hieroglyph translates into both moon and breast. You'll see why in just a minute. And then the pre-Celtic people followed the moon and saw it as the cycles of life and creation. And in Ireland, their stories talk about the rivers mirroring the Milky Way, mirroring the stars of the Milky Way. So the Celtic, and actually they're pre-Celtic because the Celts didn't come on the scene in the very beginning. So many of these stories are even before the Celts, but it's a term we recognize and call it Celtic, even though it predates the Celts. But Anya is considered the goddess of love and light because she brings light into the darkness. And there are many, many stories about her. She is regarded as part of the earth, but she's regarded as the light from the sky, and a host of stories that go along with that. Eärnrod is a Welsh goddess of both the moon and the stars. And Epona is another of the long list of moon goddesses. She's a Celtic horse goddess of both magic and fertility, but she's associated with the night and with dreams. So she's included as one of the moon goddesses, even though she's not specifically with the moon. So those are just some samples of that Celtic line. The ancient Egyptians' stories, moon stories, included both the male and female, masculine, female. We call them gods and goddesses. The Egyptians refer to them as the Neteru, but that's a story for another day. Isis is considered a moon deity as well as a goddess of the sun. And Hathor is also both the sun and the moon goddess. Many times Isis has this thing above her head. This represents the royal seat, the chair of the pharaoh and the queen. But many times she also has the same headdress as Hathor, which is a set of cow horns, because they're called the cow goddesses, the cow meaning life-giving. So those cow horns are on the top of the head, and then that disc is both a solar disc and a lunar disc. And so the story with Hathor is that from her breast flows the stars of the Milky Way and all of the waters of life. Very similar storylines in some of the Irish stories where those rivers mirror the Milky Way. So Hathor was, or if you consider her still as a guide, is life itself. She is regarded as a creator goddess who rules the cycles of the moon, the cycles of our seasons, and the entire wheel of the human lifespan. So in the Egyptian line, those stars were closely associated with those, the realm of the Neteru and all of the actions that they did. And so this is a husband and wife team, a partner team. Tahuti is the Egyptian name. The Greek translation is Thoth, so you may have heard of Thoth but not heard of Tahuti, but Tahuti is the Egyptian translation of that name. And then there's Seshet, his partner. So Tahuti is regarded as the Egyptian god of wisdom, of the arts, and of science. And he measured time by the moon and the cycles of the moon. And on his head, that he has that crescent. Those are not cow horns this time. That's actually the crescent moon with that moon and sun disk on his head. And then Seshet is a deity of the night sky, the stars, and of time, and a host of other things. Both of them have far more responsibilities than that. But her headdress is a 7-pointed star, and above that star is this arc. And some people refer to it as the arc is a bow, where she's directing her energies and her architectural abilities with the bow. Other people refer to it as the crescent moon. At any rate, there's a curve above the 7-pointed star on her head. Then there's Amun-Ra, the sun god. Now, I bring up the sun because without the sun, we wouldn't have the light from the moon. So the sun is very, very important in any study of the moon. So Ra, the creator god, the sun god, controlled creation, controlled the sky, the rising and setting of the sun. So he assigned one of the goddesses named Nut, spelled N-U-T. Nut was to receive the setting sun in the west and take it into her body, hold it in gestation through the night, and every morning give birth to the sun. And then the god of the moon, Kansu, was a god of night light, not just a god of the moon, but specifically the night light. His job was to travel across the sky at night to watch and protect Newt, but also to watch and protect all those who travel at night, both human and animals. And he joined Tahuti to mark the passage of time with that moon cycle. So listening to ancient stories can be very helpful and can give us lots of ideas and images and guidance. But we have to balance those stories by listening to the storyteller within. What is our introspective look at those stories? What guides do we call forth to help us in our spiritual growth and development? So we can use this guidance by transforming yourself by drawing on your inner resources, drawing on your own introspective thought to help you reach that wisdom consciousness. Taking, when I call the directions, we go to the West to sit with the ancestors, to listen and learn and gather knowledge. We go to the North to convert, transmute, transform that knowledge into wisdom consciousness. So it's very important to listen to the ancestors, to find guides, but to take that into yourself, to draw on your inner voice. And part of the journey of transformation, of spiritual development, is keeping yourself in balance and in harmony. So aligning yourself with the vibrations and the energies of these celestial bodies that are floating around in the sky can help us with our harmony. So the planets add to our storyline. And so today I just want to talk about one of the planet transitions. Saturn has moved into the constellation of Pisces. Now, this is important because Saturn has a 29.5-year cycle around the sun. We have a 1-year cycle, 365-ish days. Saturn takes 29.5 years to go around. So when she moves from one zodiac constellation to another, that stays with us for a longer period of time. So first, let's talk about Pisces. It's the last sign of the zodiac system. So planets moving through Pisces indicate the ending of a cycle. So Saturn moving into Pisces is telling us that we've got this 29.5-year cycle coming to a conclusion, ready to start up again. So Pisces is a water sign and it's mutable. So it's about light and dark, the unseen worlds. It's about creativity. It's about flowing. Lots and lots of directions there with Pisces. And Saturn, it's kind of a counter to this. Saturn is about responsibility, about restrictions, about boundaries. Pisces is free flowing. Saturn's about boundaries. So it's about facing the positive and the negative results of our actions as we look at this. Another very strong aspect of Pisces is religion and spirituality. So as Saturn moves into Pisces, the question comes up, what are your spiritual beliefs? And Saturn stands beside Pisces to say, what are your long-held beliefs? And do they still apply? Now, Pisces, the fish is the symbol of Pisces. The Pisces energy tends to swim away from responsibilities, swim away from looking at your belief system, swim away from having to face things. But Saturn brings us grounded energy to blend with that Pisces creativity so that we can really put some ideas into action. The result for this period of time for the next 2.5 years or so, about 3 years, the result is taking responsibility for your actions. So Saturn comes to ask, what are you putting into motion? Pisces cannot swim away anymore. Pisces is swimming around with Saturn, asking you to think about what your actions are. What are you taking responsibility for? What are you ignoring? So Saturn will be in Pisces, except for a brief little time where it goes in and out, but essentially will be with us in this setting until 2026. So let's take a minute to look back at the last time Saturn was in Pisces. So think about what was happening in your life and in the world from May of 1993 to April of 1996. And then 1964 to 67. And probably doesn't apply in terms of us being alive on people on this call, but 1935 to 1938 was pretty significant. There were all some very significant things happening in the world, and I had to sit and think about this in my life, and wow, there's some major transitions that happened for me during those times. So take just a moment to jot down, think about your life during one of these phases. Do you remember anything significant from 93 to 96? Was that a turning point for you? Was there something large, something significant? Or how about 1964 to 67? Anything major occurred in that timeline? So just make a note of those dates, because you may want to look back and think about that, because that may give you some idea of what you may be looking toward in this 3-year cycle. If there were relatively minor events, then you may not have as much happening in this next 3 years. For me, I'm a little shocked by looking back at those 2 life cycles for me, because those were big turning points in my life. So let's look for just a minute at the world events that happened when Saturn was in Pisces. 1935 to 1938 is, you can say, oh yeah, that doesn't apply to me. But actually, the Social Security Act in the United States was signed. And what that all of anyone who's over 60, whatever it is today, these days, 67, I think, in the United States, has some income coming in, and it had a major impact in the economy of the United States, which has had a major impact on other countries in the world. So that was a pretty major event, and I just pulled out some highlights of these timelines. The other thing that was happening in 35 to 38 is the rise of Hitler and the Nazis. And of course, that led to World War II. And that was an enormous turning point happening in the world, impacting everyone in the world at that point. In 64 to 67, we had a lot of revolutionary type upheaval. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was signed into law. Malcolm X was assassinated. There were race riots in Watts, and NASA's Mariner 4 flew by Mars, which was the first time we had done that. And the United States joined the bombing in North Vietnam, which led to quite a few years of that war, though it was an undeclared war. So there were some pretty major events in that 3-year period. 93 to 96, much like the other period, had some very collective optimism, but some periods of grief, collective grief in there as well. Optimistically, Nelson Mandela was elected president of South Africa, and apartheid officially came to an end, though it still had some effects there. The Irish Republican Army called a ceasefire, and so that civil war in Ireland came to a ceasefire. It took a little longer to get through it all, but the very strong periods of grief was the genocide of the Tutsi people of Rwanda. And then the Oklahoma City bombing that killed 168 people was kind of the beginning of homeland terrorism in democratic countries. It wasn't the first, but it was a significant turning point in terrorism coming out of your home base. So those are some pretty major events that occurred through there. So working with Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, a couple of steps, I would say, think about the big picture. What does this mean in the world? And the big picture of yourself. What are you doing right now? And how does that compare to what you want to do in this life? Spiritually, professionally, creatively, personally, physically, any or all of those or other areas. But look at the big picture. What are you doing? And is this what you want to do? Is this your legacy that you want to leave behind? Then the second part is to focus on your day-to-day activities. We sometimes call it the mundane stuff, but the day-to-day life. So what is your daily routine? Are you including your spiritual practice? Do you have a spiritual practice? So looking at what you're doing in that day-to-day routine and how that affects and impacts and encourages your spiritual growth and development. And then the other question of that day-to-day stuff, what are you doing to keep your body healthy? So those are questions to look at in working with Saturn and Pisces. It can help transform your life. And if you choose to go in harmony with that energy of Saturn and Pisces, you have to open yourself to change and expect new structures to come into your life. If you work with Saturn and Pisces, you have to let the change flow and let your life be in balance and in harmony, even if it's not exactly what you thought it should be. So let me ask first, Debbie, or have any questions popped into the chat? Okay, good. So let's spend just a few minutes reflecting on some of the things we've talked about today: Saturn and Pisces, the moon phases, your personal growth and development, uplifting the consciousness of our human population. And so let's just go into a short guided meditation, and I've pulled up an image for you to start. I mean, I typically close my eyes during meditation, but the image to start your meditation is the moon and the aurora borealis. So just thinking about the beauty of the earth, the beauty of nature, the colors, the light. So start with that in your mind. And then just gently, when you're ready, close your eyes. Bring your hands together in front of your heart. And we'll start with some universal life energy techniques. Focus on the tips of your little fingers, dropping your attention down your fingers, across the base of your hands and up to your thumbs. And then from your thumbs, dropping your attention back across to the little fingers. Focus on the tips of your ring fingers, your middle fingers, your forefingers. And then just slightly open your hands and focus in the palms of your hands. And then draw those hands apart there in front of your heart. And let that heart energy flow toward you, toward your physical body, around your body, through your body, out behind you. This flow of heart energy. Letting the moon illuminate that heart energy as it flows through your body. And then in your mind, take your thoughts behind your back at that heart center, and then just draw your attention up above the top of your head. Then let your attention drop down in front of your brow. And drop back into the heart center. And as you sit with your eyes closed or eyes open looking at the picture, let that illumination of the full moon shine down on the top of your head. Feel the glow coming in through the crown chakra. The sun has illuminated the moon, and the moon's soft, gentle energy is dropping down around your head, dropping down around your brow, dropping down like a soft, gentle cloud around your head, coming down around your throat, that center of communication. Let that illumination of the moon illuminate the way that you speak and communicate with people. And let that glow of the moon drop down around your shoulders, down your arms and your hands, dropping down your chest, sitting there at your heart center, all around you. Take a deep breath in and let it out. Take another one in, and as this time breathe in the moonlight, letting it come in and through your bloodstream, softly releasing the breath. And then let that moonlight continue to drop down the trunk of your body. Let it illuminate your solar plexus. And if your energetic system is a little too active, let the moonlight soften it. Let the moonlight help it be gentle. Help it slow down your reactions. And if your solar plexus and your emotions are a little underwhelmed, then let the energy of the moonlight lighten your emotional reactions. Let it be in balance in whatever way is most helpful to your system. And then let it drop down a little further toward the gonad area. That's your creative center. The projects that you can create, the artwork, the gardening, the ideas, the writing, Whatever form of creativity calls to you, let the moonlight illuminate that creativity. And look into the moonlight for new avenues of creativity. You may know that you're creative in the garden, but where else do you express creativity that you just kind of think is ordinary? Look at all your aspects of creativity. Let the moonlight shine on your creative outlets. And then let the moon drop down to the root, the center of our will, the energy that helps us pay attention to the world around us, the energy that makes us get out of bed in the morning to function in the world. Let the moonlight soften our reactions that come through the root chakra and help us remember when we enter into activities and conversations that we ask the divine will to guide us rather than our own ego driving what we're doing. And let that moon energy drop down your legs, past your knees, past your calves, all the way to your feet and into Mother Earth. You are the vessel. You are the connection between moon and earth. And the moon and Mother Earth ask you to remember your role in this amazing process of life on planet Earth. You are a beautiful, beautiful being, illuminated by the light of the moon, illuminated by the light of the sun, illuminated by the light of the divine, and connected to Mother Earth. So take a slow, easy breath in and release it slowly. Bring your hands to your heart. Put one hand on top of the other at the heart center. And say thank you. Thank you to the moon. Thank you to the earth. Thank you to the divine light. And then just take your hands and just kind of drag them down the front of your body. Drag them down to your knees and just toss that out into the earth. Let your palms touch or point toward the earth, grounding yourself. Roll your hands up, knowing that you are connected to earth, but connected to the heavens. And once again, say thank you and begin to blink your eyes, letting in the light, letting in perhaps the artificial light in your room, but letting in the sunlight that may be coming through your windows. And even though you don't see the moon at this moment, letting in the illumination of the moon. And looking at the screen, there she is, that lovely moon. So as we close our session today, I want to thank the ancestors for coming from the north, from the west, from the south and the east, from above and below. We say thank you. Thank you for all who joined us. Thank you for guiding us. Thank you for all that is. Aho, Ashi, Amen. Blessed be. Alhamdulillah. And so it is. Thank you. If you're interested in the course, go to Mother Earth. Let me, I can post this in the chat again. Let me stop the share so we can come back together. And let's go to the gallery view. Let me stop my, let's see, remove the spotlight so you're not just focused on me. And so there are the links if you're interested in those, or you can send me an email or go to the website. Any questions about that? Oh, Mary, I see you made it. Yeah, Mary had sent me an email earlier saying she would come in a little late. Yeah. So any comments? You can unmute yourself if you'd like to add any comments. Yeah, Jan, go ahead.
I've noticed this for quite a while. I love watching the moon rise, but there's very much a male energy to the moon rising. When I get up early in the morning and watch the moon set, it's a female face. You know, what his eyes and the two lines that come over like this are become the pouty little mouth of a woman. It's so cool. And so I always honor the setting moon because it's just so beautiful to me and so female.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, clearly the moon has a feminine connection because our physical body follows the moon cycles. But I don't think that there's anything that is totally masculine or totally feminine. You know, there's an aspect of each, and I'm so glad you brought that up because it's really important to see both the masculine and the feminine aspects of the moon. Yeah.
It's interesting that it feels so much more female in the morning and more male in the evening. I don't know. I haven't really analyzed that, but really next time you get up early in the morning and you see the moon, take a look at that female face. It's really clear.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else? Any comments or questions?
I just have a comment about calendar. When you are pregnant, I was a mother baby nurse for 30 years. When you are pregnant, they determine the gestation on a 40-week cycle, a lunar cycle, not a month, you know. So we say it's 9 months, but it's actually not quite, it's a little more than 9 months, but it's based on the 10-week cycle.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for that really nice, especially the meditation. It was really sweet. More than sweet, but you know. And I wanted to just suggest that when you're looking at Pisces and Saturn, you also look at what house it's in, because that's the stage upon which the actor and the role are played out. So I think it's in the fifth house. And so that would mean that for this duration of that particular energy that comes from those that planet in that particular part of the sky, but in the fifth house would be about our families, our children, mostly our children, joy, things like that, things that connect with the fifth house. So it kind of you can set a stage, if you will, by what house it's in. And I'm doing this top of my head, but you look that up, and then when you add the uh, the planet and its energies, but then the role through which it's the influence through which it's playing out its energy, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So it's the actor, the part, and the stage. It sort of helps me with my head, you know. So I decided that anyway. I gotta go, and thank you so much. It was lovely.
Thank you. Yeah. Linda, you're unmuted. Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to ask if you or anyone else had noticed that in the last 6 months or so, because I also watched the moon rise. And when she's moving towards her fullness, that there's a beautiful halo that's been happening, encircling her. And I know there's more light coming onto the planet, and I don't know if anybody else has seen it. I actually have taken pictures of it, but it's incredible.
It is. It's beautiful. As I understand it, and I'm not astronomer, I guess would be the word to that, but it has to do with the moisture around the Earth, which is not necessarily a good sign. That it's cloud levels that we're looking through that cause the ring around the moon and other things. I heard someone say the other day that we will have, because of our climate changes, bringing rain into some places are having less rain, some are having more, but those that are having more rain will have a dimmer view of the stars and the planets and the moon because of the heavier cloud level. And it's not like you look up, you know how it is when it's heavy clouds, you can't even see the sun. Not that level necessarily, but just a thinner level causing some haze up there. I even saw it in Egypt in February and March. Egypt gets rain in October. No, I mean, seriously, they get a half an inch of rain in October. That's it. And occasionally they have some clouds that come through. But I noticed several times that the moon had that haze around it from the clouds. And there should not be that many clouds in an arid desert area. So I don't know. I mean, the person that told me that was not a scientist, but was pretty knowledgeable about the climate changes. So I don't know. Yeah. Any other comments? Anybody? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming today, and email me if you come up with any thoughts or questions. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much for being here today.